So, hey chat, yeah, so we're doing this sort of style as in I make a devlog, put everything on Google Slides, walk through it, and you guys sit and watch and let me ramble about the funny word game. So yeah, we're doing the style again, also because it's easy, convenient, and I don't need to walk, like, I want to say 5 miles out just to record and then stop midway through recording. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So as a recap, last Wumble Wednesday also took like 28 minutes. So we're going to do our best not to do that. But in terms of the project, we had a working evaluation system, as well as a basic posting system where people put words into a sentence, and when a player hit the post button, that actually got logged on the server end. Also, the second big thing that happened last week was the fact that the true word and definition system actually happened and started working up and got everything connected with the entire word system, period. Or at least defining that to a larger degree. Also, scene transitions between the game as a whole being like, we could start at the title, then we could start moving into the deck list, start of a scene, then into a ready scene, then into a battle scene, and then when you sort of ended a battle, you go back to the ready scene. So when it comes to the goals that were set last week, the three main goals were as follows. One, saving the player battle posts on the server side. We logged that data, but we didn't actually save it, which is kind of important, which is what I attempted to do this week. We'll see how that ended up. So yeah, saving the posts, and then also having players be able to read any posts on the server. So if I were to sort of play any number of posts, another player gets to be like, hey, what have any players posted recently? And they can sort of see that recent post list. Number two, cleaning up on the front end. A lot of stuff was in, but also I wanted to make a lot of stuff clearer. So giving more visual feedback for the player for what is actually happening. On top of that, having a deck selection page and filling that up, as well as having visible posts. So that goes back to the sort of like, okay, we have a online database that is sort of getting added to as people play the game. I want the players to actually see that data outside of me just logging that info inside of like a terminal. Finally, an English parser. So when I did sort of finding out, hey, when is this part of speech valid? For instance, a determiner is valid when there is a noun in front of it. However, if I say the fast dog, that determiner is still valid due to the fact that a noun is in front of it, even though it's farther ahead. So let's actually talk about if we met some of those goals and if this was a productive week. So when it comes to the front end, we have, just to first tackle it, non-battle stuff. We actually ditched the sort of text macro as text box is our new best friend. The reason why I didn't immediately swap to it was because there's a lot, well, not a lot, but there was a larger refactor that needed to happen because the way it sort of did the text system was that there was a specific like text resizer that paired up with the like background rectangle. This is sort of relevant when it comes to the specifically like a word button. Instead of like having an entire database of being like, hey, if you're like creating a button for this word, it needs to be this size or needs to be that size. What we're actually doing is we're checking the sort of like pixel width estimation of like just a font. So for instance, I think my pixel width for a large, I have that set to like 5 or 7 pixels, and then it would sort of like be like, okay, how many letters are in the string? Okay, get the numbers of like letters in the string, and then multiply it by the sort of like estimated amount, and then just resize the rectangle. However, the way text box works is that it's a actual box, which means it has its own sort of like height and width to sort of deal with, which meant I couldn't just copy and paste the text code over when it comes to the resizer. I need to make a like specific custom resizer for a pairing of the rectangle and the text box. So that took a hot second, but like, things look a lot better. Also, posts existing. There was a fair amount of work put into this. I can sort of walk through this real quick. So this would be where a player's profile picture is. At the moment, I've not made profile pictures past this default one. This is the username. A username consists of 3 words that exist within the game. So the sort of default one that y'all will be seeing when it comes to testing is just dfastdog, because that's just what's hard-coded in. But I do plan for users to actually create their own username when the time comes. This is the actual battle post. So for instance, this user played the word "so," the slime explode, and that was the entire battle post, and that sort of gets rendered not as the like blocks you guys are familiar with, but just as a line of text. This is the point score, which we're calling views. This is the multiplier, which is sort of like interactions. So if a sentence makes more sense, dependent on the parts of speech and whatnot, it'll get more multiplier added to it. And then from there, this is the sort of total. So 51 times 1 is 51. Given this screenshot, you guys can probably guess what happened or where we might be lacking this week, but we'll get to that later. Finally, also just using large text more. It doesn't mean it's perfectly readable, but it's a lot more readable than just using a sort of medium text. Also, custom icons. These are custom icons I made real quick. I think these are 10 by 10 sprites, so nothing too crazy. So yeah, when it comes to the battle, there really wasn't a challenge because the score, it was static, as in like it was just 100 every time. So now it's increasing at a linearly fashion, being 50 per level. So we're gonna go start at 100, then 150, then 200. That is going to be a fix. That's going to be something I tweak later to make it more difficult, but for now, that's just what it is. When it comes to discarding and posting, though, there are actually restrictions now. At the moment, it's just set to 5, so each player only gets 5 discards and 5 posts per level, or like per sort of quote-unquote battle/posting session, meaning you have to use them well, or else you're done, period, because there's now a loss state. On top of this, to give more general visual feedback, when you tap a word in battle, specifically when you click it to sort of send it to either play or hand, there's now a particle system that I integrated from Stoff. I will link I will link his GitHub profile and Instagram right here because I forget his full name, but I was at a workshop earlier today where he showed off this particle system, and I was like, oh, great, that'd be fun and easy to implement. And then that took me, I want to say, 3 hours to get it comfortably working. So, yeah. It's now harder to play the game. It doesn't make it hard. I still need to make the game a lot harder because it's fairly easy right now. But it's going to get harder over time. And there is a sort of set cap, which will sort of result in a lose state if you play your words wrong. Adding on to this, battle words are also text boxes now, and they use large text. This should hopefully improve on readability, and this also censors the text. Alright, so this next bit is going to be a bit weird because I'm going to be talking about evaluation. So to clarify what I mean when I say eval or evaluation. So an evaluation is when the sort of system checks one possible definition in seeing if it's the new max. What this essentially does is that for every word, it's going to check every single definition, and then it's going to go to the next word and it's going to check sort of every single definition, but instead of doing a breadth first search, it's going to do a depth first search. So it's going to sort of test one definition as much as possible. So it's going to do the first definition of like the first word, then the first definition of the next word, and then so on until there are no more words to check. Then it'll sort of go back and be like, hey, can we try the second definition? If there is one, great, let's do what we did again. And if not, we're just going to sort of go back to the previous word and test the next definition. And what the evaluation is it's just doing a singular evaluation of one of those possible definitions, and again, seeing if it's the max. this in turn meant, to sort of give a example, when I'm stress testing with like some four letter definition words, that can result into up to 10,000 evaluations happening. And when it was previously happening in a linear time, being like, okay, one evaluation every 3 frames, that meant the evaluation process would take like 4 minutes, even 5 sometimes, to the point where I'd be like, okay, I'm stress testing, and I'm just checking to see how these words collide. I'm just gonna walk away till it's done, because it genuinely took that long. So I'm glad to say that that was one of the more urgent fixes that I tackled this week, where it sort of starts off slow, sort of waiting like 5 frames per sort of evaluation, but then it starts sort of picking up through a sort of like tweening sort of system where it starts off at 5, and then it slowly starts moving to 1, sort of like evaluation per second. And then I want to say past a certain number, it will actually start doing multiple evaluations per frame. Previously, I said I didn't want to do this because, again, it might clutter visual feedback or audio feedback. But I did sort of find a fix around that. Just sort of having any visual/audio feedback only come around once every other frame. And on top of that, just only like sort of giving visual feedback on the first sort of like max found that frame. That would sort of like prevent like multiple maxes being found in a singular frame when we're sort of testing 5 definitions at a frame, instead of hearing like 5 like banging of the keyboards instead of one instance. They're set like spread out more. Yeah, that's sort of what I was doing on that end, to make stuff not only go faster, but when it goes faster, not overwhelming the player too much, at least. So yeah. Also, this is a bug. I didn't really talk about it too much because I didn't really send a build out with it in that state, or publicize it too much. But there was a bug where people could actually move words when there was a evaluation happening, which could actually result in not great stuff happening. So I removed it by making it so that the player could not interact like with any buttons whatsoever while an evaluation was happening. That's the quick fix. I do want to sort of make some other tweaks so that it's not using that system, or at least it's not just hey, can the player interact or can the player not? Because there might be some instances where I want the player to interact with a certain button only, and that's it. To prevent them from like adding extra things from Beyond the Grave. I don't know. It's just testing every possible case. But enough of that. I'll tackle that some of the time. When it comes to the evaluations, and because I'm tackling them in a non-linear time, not only just going faster, but to the point where I'm doing like 5 to 7 evaluations per frame if it gets to that point. That then means I can do around 10,000 evaluations in around 30 seconds due to a speed increase. And I don't want to show off the game too much, as in I will talk about it for way too much and then just bleh. I do want to sort of show off how this works. So when I sort of do the stress test, I usually start with like so and yet. Also, visual feedback you're seeing. But like, yeah, I will just toss everything in there. And y'all should be hearing a bit of that audio. But every time a evaluation is happening, it's sort of incrementing a evaluation counter. Just sort of let me know, like, hey, we're doing one more, right? So once this finishes, we're going to see in the sort of log right here, yeah, we were doing around 9,000 evaluations within that time frame. I was not recording the time that took, so editor may put how long that took, please. Thank you. Yeah. So evaluations not only happen a lot faster now, but they happen in a sort of smoother sense where it's not immediately like, hey, we're doing this fast now. It eases into it, which is the big thing. Also, just sort of walking through, no decks, still, or at least no decks to choose from. I'm still using the base deck. Here, when you sort of load in, again, this is the Betty scene, I decided to populate it with all the posts. So it's just showing the sort of 4 most recent posts. It is technically showing more, but I've not implemented a swipe system so that you can sort of see the rest of them that are currently loaded in. And we sort of go back to here. That's evaluation, but I do want to show off this real quick. I'm going to intentionally fail this run. This is what the death screen looks like live. Yeah, and I mean, I can play other words, but like I can't post anymore because again, I have that limit. And once that limit is reached, I can't just post any of this. So I'm either forced to go back to the deck list screen or this goes back to the home title screen. So yeah, I just want to quickly show off some live gameplay, nothing too crazy, as if you guys follow me on either Blue Sky or YouTube or elsewhere, and keep up with some of the videos, that is stuff you've already seen, but we're just going to continue on. Finally, let's actually talk about the back end. So when it came to the past week, it was pretty rough data-wise when I was actually logging info, because when I was logging it originally, I was setting the entire battle data in. So this would include not just the word enum, but the word data as a whole, the true word data as a whole, and each definition tied to the true word as a whole. This then meant that, like, for instance, if I had, like, just one word I was tossing in, I would toss in, like, hey, this. And it wouldn't just be the enum this, it would be the score attached to that word, and then adding the true word, and then adding every singular definition attached to the this true word. And that was just inefficient, because all I really needed was just, hey, what word did I use to, like what were the words played? I don't need the specific word, like, point value, because that is something that'll be sort of held client side. So that's not really important to hold, and it's just going to take up more storage. So what I did instead was I trimmed out a lot of the data. So all I'm really sort of sending when I'm sort of posting is specifically player data, any battle post numbers that are relevant. So this would be the total as a whole, the total points and the total multipliers, and just the word enum, because that's all that really matters. Oh, sorry, not the word enum, but a vector of word enums, which is from the dictionary. Because I'm like, yeah, I want to know what players said, but do I need to know specifically how they got to that point? Do I need to specifically know how much each word, like, is valued at in the server specifically? Because in the on the client side, on the phones, on the devices, that matters. But I just need a reference to that specific word. So that's all we're going to be storing for the sake of, again, data. But I mentioned player data. So what does that actually entail? That entails a combo of 3 words, because I thought it'd be fun to use a similar system, being the word system, for the username, rather than just having users type their own username. Also because that prevents usernames that we don't want in the game period. So I don't need to sort of create a filtering system, hopefully. Also a profile picture enum, which is what you guys saw over here. The thing in the middle, the circle, there's meant to be a profile picture in there, and that technically is a profile picture, but it's just the default profile picture sprite. But because the sort of user, the test user that I'm using for development, just has the sort of default profile picture enum, I'm sending that up server side, and then when it's interpreted client side, it's just going to load a post, and it's going to interpret the player data, and it's going to see that, hey, this player had this specific profile picture enum, and it's going to load that profile picture, and we're good. Which is great, because I don't need to just save those images server side, because all the pictures are just going to be saved on the client side, due to the fact that it's like not people tossing up their own pictures, it's just stuff that already exists within the game, and then people can just reassign whatever they want. So that saves storage heavily. So yeah, when it comes to a battle post, so that is when I'm specifically pressing the post button, we are sending in player data as well as the battle post data, being the battle post numbers and the sort of vector of words. That's all sort of getting combined into one struct, and then I'm tossing that in a vector, which is what we're sort of partially seeing. I'm gonna open the game again. Here. This is just everything sort of in that struct displayed. It just goes down, and there's no scrolling right now, which is why we're not seeing more of that. But that's what it's doing. It's interpreting the most recent data that it has on hand, and just displaying it downward. I will also note, I don't mention it in this sort of slide deck, but I'm also looking to create a sort of reload button. What that's going to do is that every frame, even if you're not hitting the reload button, it's going to continue watching the server to sort of get any new information on any battle post history. And that way, when you hit the reload button, you can just immediately pull the save data that is saved onto the reload button, delete all the old sort of battle posts, and then just load in the new ones. So it's going to consistently load from the server, but when you hit the reload button, it's actually going to display the stuff it gathered. So yeah, this is where I toss it over to chat. What do you guys think? Was it successful? Personally, I do think it was, because even if I didn't entirely meet the goals that I've set for myself this week, so if I sort of go back to that slide, let's actually tackle this real quick. So when it comes to the first goal, I feel like it's just, I've done this. It is very clear that stuff is getting saved on the sort of server, and I'm also able to sort of interpret that on any sort of player. Any player is able to open the game, enter that ready scene, and then see what has been posted recently. So that is not an issue. So one is completely done. When it comes to the front end, we are giving more feedback to the player when it comes to just, hey, if you're clicking a button, if you're specifically clicking a word battle, a battle word button, you are seeing a burst of particles to show that hey, this is now gone, but it actually went over there. So take a look at that. I did not update the deck selection system, however. In theory, it should work fine, but it's just right now, there's only one deck, and I need to implement prefabs so that when you sort of click a specific button, it's going to load that assigned deck, and then when you sort of hit ready to start, you will start with that deck. I know how to do it, it's just not up yet. When it comes to 2.3, there are visible posts, so again, that's not an issue. Finally, when it comes to the third main goal, I'm still working on it. What I can say is that interjections are fully in, because the way I understand interjections is that it will just, because they act as onomatopoeias that just stop the sentence, they just work. They'll clear any sort of stuff that needed to be resolved and sort of presume that it wasn't relevant to the introduction. So it's semi-in. And then as for nouns and pronouns is the way they're sort of implemented at the moment, it's a very bare level. But if it's the sort of first element after a wall, so what I've defined a wall as is if it's the first in the sort of evaluation sort of vector as a whole, or just after an interjection, because interjections are sort of treated as walls, then it's good. And it'll give you the assigned multiplier for nouns. But would I say the full English parser is set up? Absolutely not. But even with that being said, I would say that there's a fair amount of development in other areas that aren't listed here specifically, or just a lot of player feedback as a whole, which is why I believe, even if all these 3 goals were not completely satisfied, this is a good week for development. But I want to hear what you guys think. So let's go back to here. Let's actually finish this off. So when it comes to the goals for the next week, I'm actually going to try to finish the English parser at a larger scale, because again, that's like one of the core, it's going to be one of the core gameplay mechanics. Actually taking into account different parts of speech and reflecting that in the final result of your points or your total to like progress. Yeah. Number 2, actually getting non-battle sort of posts, which are sort of known as the perks. So in Balatro, these would be your jokers. I want to get those up and at least running in some form, because I know how much sort of annoyance the English parser is going to be. Am I going to say, hey, these should be fully expended upon and done? Absolutely not. But I do want them sort of working in some capacity, especially in the evaluation stage, so that definitions and words and true words can take that into account when doing their evaluation script. Finally, this is a weird one, but I want to refactor definitions to include tags. When I was talking about this game previously, I mentioned that, like, hey, if you're playing dog, there should be like an animal tag or there should be a nature tag. I don't have those in at all, though, is the problem. But I do want that to be part of the game as a whole, because I feel like that is just the main thing that is going to get these jokers and posts to work and actually feel good. On top of that, for words like, I don't know, boot hail, to not only have them exist as a word, but for them to specifically have certain tags to make different perks easier to find when they should care about certain words, would be great. For instance, if I were to make a Undertale or Deltarune perk, where it sort of like boosts your point score for playing relevant words, I want, for instance, the word deer, soul, cage, prophecy, shard. I want those words to have, depending on the definition, I want one of those definitions to have like a Deltarune tag. So that way, when I'm doing an evaluation script, if the definition is sort of looking through all the jokers to see what like matters to it, and it sees, hey, we're kind of a Deltarune reference because we have the word shard, that'll make things a lot easier. But with that being said, this is another 30-minute bit. So thank you for listening. I'll try to cut this up to make it easily parsable, but see you around. Bye.